required, at least here in Polk County and numerous other counties across the state. Those situations give opportunities for the parents to come together and seek alternatives if they know shared parenting is not going to work. If they can't agree and shared parenting isn't going to work, let the judge decide that, but let's let them start out on an equal footing. And I think, although it's personally against my best interest to be in favor of this, I hope you guys vote in favor for this bill.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Charles Lathrop. I started this journey about 27 years ago. I had 3 unique experiences, 3 different children. So first child, my oldest boy, is 27. Me and my ex had him at 16 years old. So usually, teenagers have first kid. That relationship really doesn't last too long. So we split up a couple years later, but she always knew how engaged and how much I loved my child. So the rift started right there because she wanted to just limit my ability to be with my child. So when we went down to the courthouse, so that way she could establish, visitation, or we could establish visitation and child support. One thing that dawned on me later on that I didn't realize at the time, that both the lawyers for each side come up the same elevator at the same time. It dawned on me later on that they already knew what I was going to get. There was no doubt in my mind that they already had it decided. And I had no access to the judge. I had their lawyers going in and out. So it turns out I got the obligatory, every other weekend and a little bit on Wednesday. Not much influence in my child's life throughout that time. By the time I really got that established, he was already getting to an age where I couldn't correct him at all, because if he come over, I had to make that time really special, really good, because if he did anything wrong, if I correct him, then he wouldn't want to come over, and his mom wouldn't have him come over. If he said he didn't want to come over, she wouldn't let him. So my second boy, I was 21, and my ex was 17 at the time. So we had a young boy, split up about 4 or 5 years later, put our best effort into it. She also knew how much, I loved my children. She actually, seeing the heartache that I went through with my oldest boy, said, oh, I swear, I promise I would never do that to you. I believed it. Why wouldn't I, right? So we split up. She did exactly that. So she didn't want me to have any influence on him. She knew she could control every aspect of that, and how she really locked that in, she moved out of state. I knew it was going to be hard for me to go up and back and forth, but I was going to do it. I was going to do whatever I had to do. So I sent paperwork up there so we could establish paternity with child support. She refused to sign it. She just wouldn't. So I have no established legal paternity in my youngest son's life because of that. And he's 21 now. So when I had my daughter at 35, I wanted to make sure I did everything different. So when me and her mom split up, the first time we had a rift, before we had paternity established, I said, that's it, I'm not done. I'm not going to argue back and forth, and this obviously is not going to work, so I'm just going to go get a lawyer, and we're going to go to court. Luckily, my mom had disability money at the time, so I was able to get a pretty decent lawyer. She was able to give me a pretty strong foothold in my child's life. So I don't have the obligatory every other weekend, one day for a few hours. I actually have her extended visitation, so I have it from Saturday morning from 9:30 into Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I also have her on the opposite weekend from Monday into Tuesday. So there's not one, she only goes 5 days without my influence or my guidance and all that stuff. And I truly believe, just the way the other parent is, that she wouldn't be as well-rounded as she is if I wouldn't have had that access with her like I did with the boys. And to say each family is different, absolutely makes perfect sense. I look around the room, everybody looks different to me, right? That doesn't mean our wants and desires and needs are not the same. That doesn't mean we strive just as much as the mothers do to be, or the other parent does, to be in the child's life. Or that we don't put our best foot forward. It doesn't have to be adjudicated every time. Go to mediation. Judges don't have to be bogged down by this. There's other ways. Counseling, mediation. Every time I went to court, $19,000 over the last 9 years, just to try to get a little bit more every time. So all she had to say, we don't get along. We can't communicate. That's all she had to say, even though I did everything I could to reason, to reconcile, to be, compassionate. And you cannot say it's in the best interest of the child, because if that's true, she would be in my custody. I have DHS form after form from her calling DHS on me. Not too long ago, my daughter was out of school because I didn't call and let her know why. Even though I followed all the steps, she was under my care, under my time. I called the school. Next thing you know, I got police showing up at my door for a welfare check. A couple years ago, on Father's Day, just sitting there, hanging out with my daughter, having a great day. I picked her up. We're supposed to do 50-50. So her mom was supposed to come get her. Simple as that. She threw a fit. And she called the cops to escort her over there. Pulls in my driveway, and next thing I know, I'm getting in an argument, and she's trying to get me for harassment, and I told her, you're in my driveway, back away. So it was just not needed, because as emotional as I was, it could have turned out worse, just because she brought, the police over to my house numerous times for just no reason at all. And they automatically just kind of look at the father like he's the aggressor. It happens all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Didn't we have somebody else on the board? Okay, go ahead.
My name is Zachariah. I actually come from Marion County. I'm 23 years old, and I have seen both sides of the cases, so I want to thank both sides of everybody coming, whether either for or against. I have a 14-year-old brother. I'm 23. My parents have recently divorced about 4 years ago. I'm going to be going through and having a baby come March, and I'm currently going to be going through this system. As it goes right now, exactly like everybody is saying, even through mediation, 80% of mothers get the case and fathers do not. I'm also coming here as mother's standpoint and saying that not every father should have majority or at all custody themselves. My parents, when they divorced, my dad is an over-the-road truck driver, so he did get less of custody based on his job. But when I come and say that, even though he does have the weekends off, he really does not want to be around. So yes, every case is different. And I want to say that in the standpoint that I myself, as going to be a soon father, I want to be a part of my child's life, and I am a very fit parent because of that. I am doing everything in my power to go through and at least have 50-50 custody and be there for my child, but as the court's ruling go right now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that. And this is where my stand is where I am for this bill, and at least give every child the chance to have both parents in the house. Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny Carroll, I represent the family leader. We registered in support of the bill, and thank you for the bill. It's always made sense to me that the legal system should begin with an assumption that the child is going to continue equal with mom and dad. You put yourself in the position of that child, they're kind of the last one to know. Mom and dad are having problems, their friends know about it, maybe grandparents know about it. Child has nothing to say. They're on the receiving end, and they begin with an assumption that it's going to go pretty much one way or another, as some of these testified, as opposed to they love both parents. Why not begin with that presumption? Rebuttable, very convincing, the lawyers can figure out that. But why not begin with an assumption? The child, it's in the best interest of the child to have equal time with both parents. Mr. Chair, reluctantly, but I will conclude with a personal testimony. In 1955, my parents divorced. That was a long time before a lot of the laws that we're under today. My mom announced to my dad see that child, meaning me. And for 41 years, he didn't. It wasn't until I was well into my 40s that I decided to go and try and find him. I never knew my father. Now I met him, but it just wasn't the same. It's not like on TV. We didn't go running through the airport hugging and crying. It was actually kind of weird. I thought, that guy looks just like me. What if they had gone to court and began with an assumption that that little 2-year-old boy might just do well with a father in his life equal to his mother, and begin with that assumption? I don't know, maybe he was a jerk, maybe he shouldn't have been in my life. But it began with an assumption that it would go all her way, and it did. And for 40 years, we grew up without a father. What if it had begun the other way? Might I have had a relationship with my dad, who's now deceased? Why don't we begin with that? Let the courts and the attorneys adjust accordingly. They can figure out a different way to operate under those different conditions. Divorce is awful. My mother married and divorced twice more. I know it firsthand. Every time I go to a family reunion, I'm reminded of it. Probably everyone in this room has some involved with it. But why should children have to begin with an assumption that they're not going to spend equal time with their parents? Why don't they begin with an assumption that they are, and let us prove otherwise?
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll make it brief. My name is Jennifer English, and I'm here as a mother, as a second wife, stepmother, and as an adult child of divorced parents myself. So the issue of shared parenting has touched my life in many different ways. And I'll just give a little brief personal testimony myself. My father and my mother divorced in 1989, I believe it was, and at that time was not given equal parenting between the two. So I've had, over the years, extremely small amounts of parenting time with my father. I love him dearly. He's a great man. We, unfortunately, just don't know each other well. There's now a great deal of distance between us, physically and emotionally. But I remember as a child going and wondering if I was going to get off that plane and recognize this man that was supposed to be so important in my life, or if he would recognize me, because that much time had gone on between us without seeing each other, and I had grown and he had aged. And I do remember at one point, a year went by, a whole year went by without us seeing each other, and he shaved his beard, and I literally did not know what he looked like. That's a feeling that I don't think any child should ever have to feel, not knowing securely who their parent is. My husband was fortunate enough to have a pretty agreeable custody set up between his ex-wife. They do not get along at all. He was, however, able to see his child for 2 weeks at a time, every 6 weeks. He was given certain holidays, they alternated. It was honestly one of the better agreements that I've seen for fathers. And that's sad, because that time still only equated to 25% of the year. She was able to relocate, as she's done many times. We have fought this fight through Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, and now Colorado. His time now equates to a week at Christmas, a week at spring break, and some weeks in the summer. We miss band concerts, we miss track events, we miss knowing her friends, we miss knowing her friends' parents to even know the character of her friends. We miss conferences. She misses the milestones of her siblings growing up. They miss her dearly. And I think had we been able to set up custody with a presumed notion of shared parenting, that picture would look very different for everybody involved. She would know her grandparents more. She would know her maternal side of the family more, who's located here, that don't get to see her either. So it branches out to a lot more than just a dad or a child or a mom. We're talking aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, personal friends here. I have family in this room that doesn't get to see her as much as they would like to. And it's not only cost us thousands of dollars, financial resources that could have been much better spent supporting our daughter. It's cost emotional turmoil to her and to us. It's incredibly difficult to explain to a 3-year-old where her sister is, who doesn't understand distance, who doesn't understand the complicated relationship between her sister's mother and her dad. But I will say this, if it's gonna come down to parental conflict, because believe me, they have lots of conflict between the two of them, rather than spending the thousands of dollars in court costs to hash this out, they both use an app called Our Family Wizard, My Family Wizard. It's an amazing tool. It's allowed them to communicate civilly and have everything documented, so there is no real dispute. They can always go back and check what one or the other person said. It has made the relationship between the two of them a lot more amicable. I don't think they'll ever repair their relationship enough to be friends, but it has saved them quite a bit of turmoil and heartache, and it has left Emma out of that conflict. So to say that we need to have the current system in place to avoid conflict with our kids, with our ex-partners, I don't believe that to be true. And I think a rebuttable presumption of shared parenting can do nothing but help the mental and emotional health of our children.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap this up shortly here, because I want to give the subcommittee members a chance to comment too, but I think we can squeeze in another one, or maybe two if you're short.
If I could end it, if that would be okay.
Pardon me?
Senator Garrett. If I might be the closer, if that'd be okay, Senator Garrett? If I could be the closer, my final comment? I'll let you
Well,
go first.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you.
We're really running tight here. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm Darren Clark from Fort City. I have 2 kids involved in the situation. We started out with 14 months of joint custody and verbal agreement, and then that's why I found an attorney and wanted to move away, and so we went to court 3 different times, preventing her from relocating, and then also school placement hearing, and then the final hearing. And in that, it was about 2 years, so we were, had the kids equal time, every other day. As crazy as that would be, my kids were thriving. When it came to the final hearing, there was all kinds of accusations brought up against me. Even though she was a mandatory reporter, never brought up that stuff before. Just that presumption that it was out there, which was all proven in court unfounded. My kids have suffered dramatically through that. My son Abraham, the first year, he had over 100 incident reports, behavioral incident reports at the daycare, at the school, just crying out for help. My daughter would cry, drew me pictures of crying. I've shared with many representatives over the years I've been down here of her crying. And so now I have every Thursday as an overnight, every other weekend, 4 nights, 4 weeks in the summer, and alternating holidays. And my kids are crying out for help. I get letters from them. I wish I could see you more, Dad. My daughter writes me letters like, Daddy, I pray that I can see you more. I can see you, I miss you. I cry in bed because I miss you. She knows I've been down here testifying in different years in different subcommittees, and she asked, hey, can I write a letter? And so she wrote this letter. She's like, this is on a spring break before she was going to spend a week with her mom. She's like, on Friday, just before spring break, I was in my bathroom sobbing. We didn't have any tissues, so I used rolls of toilet paper. I used up a whole roll. It seemed like I cried for an hour. I missed dinner because I was sleeping because of sadness. Divorce controls your feelings a lot. It can make you mean, lonely, an outsider person, or a kid. It just twisted my brother's heart. A lot thinks he's a bully, but he's not. He's just hurt on the inside. I'm the lonely one. And the kids are crying out for help. And I like where this bill have kids' interests in there too, if they're age appropriate. Dr. Richard Warshak has a book called Work Poison. In that book, he has a statement from the University of Baltimore Law Review. The most recent scientific studies cited in this review show that children can benefit from joint custody, even when parents are into conflict. The article also makes the point that some conflict between parents is instigated primarily by one parent who seeks to marginalize the other parent's relationship with the children.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up over here.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you to all the members. Thank you to Chairman John for getting this bill introduced and everybody who came to give testimonies, including the Bar Association. I believe that everybody here truly does have the children's best interest at heart, but we need to focus on using the words, the best interest of the child, as an actual goal that we are striving for, rather than an excuse to keep us in the same system that we have already been in for a number of years that has proven to be detrimental in many cases. I am a personal success story of shared parenting. Now, legally, I only have 49% on paper. That took over a 4-year battle, but we do week on, week off. We help each other when one person needs to go to the store. We, as mentioned in the beginning, people need to be mature and collaborate. That won't be for everybody. Not everybody is mature and able to collaborate. But as Mark said, you aren't going to start a Super Bowl giving another team 86-point advantage. You're going to start out 0-0 and see where it ends up. And that's what we are asking to do. And having a clear and convincing evidence form, personally, I don't see why we would give murderers more rights to have that chance to prove that they are guilty or not than what we would give to somebody who wants to be a parent of their child. That seems absolutely ridiculous to me that we would have anything other than clear and convincing evidence. I would be very interested to see these studies from the Bar Association. I know if you go to our website, the sheet we gave you here, familiesunite.org, you will see a green box that has custodial reform recommendations. There is a number of different facts in there, including how there's been over 60 studies with over 104 social scientists who came to the agreement that shared parenting is in the best interest of children of all ages. So again, all of that information and a whole lot more statistics is available on our website. It shows the definitely, again, not every situation will be able to handle that, but you should be able to start off at the go on an even level, just like you would expect in a criminal trial or any other trial. From there, if there is unfit, unwilling, undeserving parents, then by all means, you would want to take that case to court. You would want to fight for that child because you want to keep your child safe. But if you're doing anything other than that at the beginning, it usually, not always, but usually is your own insecurities that is trying to keep that child away from that other person. And when you were once in an intimate relationship, usually, sometimes it could be a one-night encounter, but these are people that you have given your deepest, darkest secrets to. And now all of a sudden you find yourself in court, bringing those moments up to throw at each other and to use those as a weapon, making it harder for anybody to trust anybody in the world. These are systemic problems that are affecting not just children, not just parents. This is affecting the entire stability of the world. And I thank you all very much for even considering this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap up here. I have another subcommittee at noon. These other gentlemen may too, so I'm going to ask the other subcommittee members if they want to make a comment or two here.
I will go ahead. I have a question actually for the Bar Association. So, as far as the clear and convincing evidence, if a parent flat out said they did not want joint custody, would that qualify in this bill as clear and convincing evidence?
Sir, that's not my understanding. The only specification in the bill to rebut the presumption is domestic violence. So I don't have a grasp on what else might rebut that presumption because the bill is extremely limited in specifying what would overcome the presumption.
Senator, if I may speak on that, I think that would qualify as clear and convincing evidence. Further, I think that the parties could, at that point in time, come to some sort of agreement outside of court. If the parent didn't want anything to do with the child, I mean, they could stipulate to that or come to an agreement with mediation.
Okay, folks, we're just going to have to move this along. It's not fair to the folks at my next subcommittee, and I don't know about these gentlemen, but we really need to conclude here. I mean, this could go on and on, obviously. It's a big subject, an important subject to everybody in the room. You want to split it?
Okay, well, I guess I'm willing to support the concept of 50-50 as long as we make sure that the language in this bill accounts for if a parent does not want that responsibility, that it takes that into effect, and this law as written does not affect that or prevent it. Senator, I would yield the rest of my time to you.
I think I've got less than a minute, and I find that unfortunate. So I won't comment. I have a lot of interest in the issue of this bill. I've got many calls from many constituents. No one has talked to me who opposes this bill directly, which I find is the arrogance of the bar by not sitting down and talking to me about this bill. And with that, I won't sign the subcommittee, but some guys, I want to learn more. I want to have more discussion. Unfortunately, an hour isn't good for this issue. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do want to go further in discussions about this issue.
Well, thank you, and I'm also going to sign the report and recommend the bill to the full committee. I'm very impressed that this many people would take the time to come up here and speak to us. I know that's not an easy thing to do for a lot of people, and the fact you've done that is very impressive to me. Franklin Bar Association, it seems to me you're kind of overstating your case here. This bill clearly gives the court the opportunity to hear clear and convincing evidence that this is not the best way to proceed. I agree it shifts the burden a little, but it doesn't mean that an unfit parent that is shown to be unfit in the court proceeding is going to qualify here, the way I read the bill. And again, thank you so much, and we'll see where the bill goes, but we'll refer it on to the Judiciary Committee.
Thank you very much.